But this is a soil fertility session. Dr. Henry Sintim, myself will share time. Henry's going to go first, about 25 minutes apiece, and ask questions. It's informal, so ask questions if you got it. All right, Henry, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. As mentioned, I'm Henry Sintim. Although it's soil fertility, I'll be delving a little bit into soil health because I feel if we can improve if we can actually improve our soil health, then it makes our nutrient management much more easy and more effective. And poor soil health have direct implications on our fertility. So there will be some relation out there. So let's get started. Give a little bit background on soil health. Talk about some of the projects we are doing and carbon monitoring and carbon market. A little bit on that, and Dr. Harris is going to what to do as far as nutrient management is at stake. Let's begin scientifically, and then I'll break it down as I can. Soil health, according to the NRCS, is the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into all that. The message I want you to capture is function. And then, for us as ag people, we're focusing on plant system, plant production. The soil does a lot of things. Even a constructor, those that put building structures also have soils, right? They work on soil. They want the soil to be having certain properties. They want it very compacted. As a matter of fact, they bring in graders and whatnot to compact it to a level so that soil can sustain the building. The same way when it comes to growing crops, the soil must have certain properties. Otherwise, it can't do some of the things it has to do as far as we growing the crop. Biological diversity, regulate and partition water and solute nutrients in that sense. It also cycles nutrients, physical support. All these are important functions that the soil does. So when we talk about soil health, it is the capacity of that soil to be able to deliver, to be able to do some of these functions that are necessary to grow crops. From that concept, what can we do? What can we do? So the NRCS has what we call the Principles of Soil Health Foundation, and it's either 4 or 5, depending on if you can integrate livestock. But ideally, you want to minimize disturbance. Management practices that minimizes disturbance. Management practices that maximize diversity, maximize soil cover, maximize living roots. If you begin to think about what management practices can do this, then that will serve as the building block for improving soil health. However, and with the various functions that we expected from the soil, you can see that not the various management practices, you don't take all. Some of them even overtake. I think they are a little bit aggressive with this slide. Some of them I disagree, but the picture I want you to get here is that they do well, but saying this one, conservation crop rotation, it takes all the box. I think that one may be up to cover crop. I don't think will satisfy some of them. They didn't show the cons of cover crop. It can have cons. I'll go into that a little bit. But we said the capacity of the soil to function. That soil can function based on physical, we measure the physical, chemical, and biological properties of the soil to be able to determine whether that soil can do the things that I showed, the various functions of the soil. So those properties, you might be familiar with them a lot. I mean, we talk about soil pH, you measure soil organic matter, cation exchange capacity. These are things that we threw out there, but they are very important to understand. And as far as soil health, actually this was the framework that was done, actually threw in this concept that even these properties, the interaction of those three is what allows the soil to function. But we also need to consider the season and climatic condition and the ecosystem and intended soil use. Let's put this into context. Let's make it practical. when we have soil pH, okay, it's a soil chemical property. Soil pH is a soil chemical property. I'm assuming we know that. And I have a blueberry farmer, and I have a cotton farmer. This is a cotton workshop. Do you think that the soil pH is the same for those two crops? No, right? So if I have a soil with a soil pH of, let's say, 4.8, to the blueberry farmer also, that is a healthy soil. To a cotton farmer, the tariffs will quickly tell you that, oh boy, you got to do something, right? You got a lime, that soil is not healthy. But it's the same soil, right? So, yes, it's the interaction of physical, chemical, and biological properties, but you got to interpret it based on the intended use. God ultimately is the function. It's the ability to grow the cotton crop. It's the ability to produce blueberry. And what informs that is unique. Each crop is very different. So that is why we need to understand those systems. Now I talk about some of these properties. There are a lot of them. Scientists keep adding a lot, and there is so much, I won't go into that, but I need you to capture 3 concepts here. Some of these soil properties, we call it more is better. What does that mean? You can't have enough of that. I mean, if my organic matter is 6%, bingo, that's awesome. Keep the more the better. The more the better. You really can't have enough of it. Right now, organic matter is less than even 1%. Then there is, I just made a scenario of soil pH. Every crop, we call it the optimum range. You want to be in an optimum range. If you are here, I just did this for a generic crop, but if the blueberry, the curve shifts a little bit, but it's optimal. It's not having too little versus having too more. It's not a good thing. You really have to be at the optimum level. And then there is what we call the less is better. The lower that value, the better. This is electrical conductivity. Easy. It's the measure of the salt. You don't want to have too much, because if you have, it's going to affect the ability of your crop to take up water. It will affect the water uptake, the water potential, which will stress the plant. So if I measure my soil and I say I have EC of 13 millisiemen, that is not good. Right? So that is it. Again, you need to have an understanding. Don't we sometimes feel like, let's put on soil texture. There is nothing you can do about your soil texture. It's out of your management. Those are formed by what we call soil forming factors. They are affected by soil forming factors. You can do nothing about them. Your tilling or not tilling versus cover crop, organic amendment is not going to change your soil texture. It is what it is. And so those properties, we call them inherent. They don't change, your management don't change it over time. When we talk about soil health management, we are more worried about things that we can change, like soil structure, infiltration, organic matter. Those are things you can change. And based on your management, it's either going to be increasing, sustaining, or you're going to decrease and degrading. I'm not using increasing or decreasing, but aggrading, sustaining, or degrading. We want to be aggrading at minimum sustaining. Because if you start degrading, then it means your soil will not be able to function. And that is going to be a problem. That if your soil is terrible, you cannot even grow certain crops. So soil health is very, very important. It's an asset. Unfortunately, it's a limited resource too. So let's protect it. This is not the purpose of this training, but I put these slides in case you want to take snapshot. These are NLCS technical notes and guides on how to do soil health assessment. Some of them might be a little bit involving, some are field. This is purely field-based, but a little bit more demanding as far as time and commitment. So one of the goals of our program, we've done a lot of soil health research. Now we've generated enough data that we have the framework. The question is about how complex should it be? How much time will you feel okay to do soil health assessment? 3 days? 6 hours? 1 hour? When you go to your field, how much time would you want to commit towards doing the soil health assessment? That's where we are kind of deciding on, and then using that to decide which indicators to shortlist for the soil health assessment. All right, so that's it on just giving a background of soil health. Let's do integrated, we're going to now into management system. I said some of your management practices can upgrade or degrade. When we talk about regenerative agriculture, as the term implies, we want to regenerate the soil. We want to upgrade those soil properties that we talked about. And again, the principle very similar to soil health foundation, except that it has the minimize the use of chemical inputs. But other than that, minimize all this stuff, maximize diversity, keep the soil covered, and then adapt to local environment. Some management practices are awesome, very great. Maybe it works in the Midwest, don't bring it here. Because our soils are different. So you must adapt that management to local conditions. As you know, our soils have very low organic matter. And so certain properties, certain practices that are forgiven here might not be forgiven if you are in a drier climate, like Arizona, or one of the driest places in the US, Lynn in Washington. It only gets about 6 to 8 inches of rainfall the entire year. So think about that. Some practices you start going to do cover crop there. Think about that, right? What can we do as far as management? We have cover crop, good thing. Tillage, conservation tillage, no-till, strip-till, great. But there is a but. What but am I talking about? The individual management practices have the advantages and disadvantages. Let's give an example. Let's do conservation till, like a no-till system. Very good. Long-term wise, improving the soil structure, because we said minimize soil disturbance. So, I want to minimize soil disturbance, straight to a no-till. In Georgia, your first year you probably go bankrupt and you may not be able to farm again. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you need to understand your context, your condition, and your environment. And so what I recommend is integrating your management and also understanding your limitation. If you can go full no-till, can you do strip-till or a minimum form of tillage? And then over time, when your soil structure is improved, you would actually not need any tillage. As a matter of fact, there is a grower that is in, where we have the 4-H club, Rock Eagle around, I forgot the name of the county, Putnam County, yeah, that's it. That has been doing great in terms of the conservation tillage, and you measure the soil compaction, the values are very good. He probably can choose not to till and will not stress his crop. Because I've measured the soil compaction and they are all good. He doesn't really need to till if he wants to. But it takes understanding and time and commitment. So we've been working on integrating some of this management system and look at what it will do. Let's look at this particular scenario. That's CT, conventional tillage, strip tillage with cover crop, conventional tillage with organic amendment, and that is poultry litter, and conventional tillage cover crop organic amendment. As you can see, there could be some implications switching to a strip till. Not too bad, but when you added cover crop, what is happening? Cover crop, we use rye cover crop, high carbon CN ratio. It's tying up nutrients, and so it's dropping. I don't know why this young zone. The reason is that poultry litter, we accounted for the full nutrients, and by doing that nutrient analysis, we did 2 tons per acre. We did not put any fertilizer on that. Ideally, that's not a recommendation from a fertility standpoint. If you're going by the production guide that Dr. Iris will tell you, we add supplemental nutrients to keep it tried. Like this, we are doing for research to understand the implications of management. Poultry litter is a good source of nutrient. It comes in when I'll show you in the 3rd year what has happened. It's changed the story. But this is year 1. in Tifton, and you can see such a dramatic change. Again, we have cover crop, organic amendment, cover crop, but let's do the economics of just year one of switching. You can see that going full blue, which is this guy. So yeah, this is really why we call the most aggressive. If you are not integrating poultry litter, look at the difference that can come. Just adopt a strip to cover crop versus when you're able to integrate. Even though you are running a little bit at a loss. That's a relative return on investment. So, and this is Medville. Now the story changed after 3 years in this trial. Again, conservation tillage, cover crop, you can see compared to the standard, see that we are really dropping. It says no statistical significance, but if I'm a farmer, if I can get 1,008 versus 1,005, I think that even if it's not statistical, I was still lean for the one that is 1,008. It makes a big difference, money-wise. And so, you can see, but then integrating poultry litter, this is 3 years. That plot did not receive any fertilizer because the nutrients are in the poultry litter based on the fertilizer requirements, it's hard enough. If we assume 60% nitrogen will be available, 80% phosphorus and potassium, and sulfur will be available, we did not. This received only 20 tons. That received 1 ton per acre poultry litter, 1 ton per acre biochar. And it's causing a little bit dip. What is happening though, what we think is happening, is that because the nutrient has been substituted, you can see that there is a buildup. This is the soil that we measure nutrients, initial soil nutrient levels. You see that over the years we've been able to build up our phosphorus and potassium. Nitrogen don't really build up in our soils, and that's why we measure it in our routine soil analysis. Look at the values, it really don't matter. So you can see it. Another thing that I'm a little bit impressed was the organic matter after 3 years. Year one, we didn't really see anything. Year two, just a little bit. And then year three, you can see the change in the organic matter, but not when we're doing 2 tons per acre biochar, a poultry litter, but adding the biochar, which is stable carbon. And this was measured 0 to 6 inch soil depth. So again, it's showing, but you have implications. It's not as great, but this looks great by just integrating poultry litter. You can observe the limitations of doing a comprehensive management practice, which is strip till. This is also strip to reduce slip, but strip till and cover crop, and we are using right cover crop. But that is a full-blown. I would say this is a full-blown. These two are full-blown way of building soil, organic matter, as you can see. But then to manage it in a meaningful way, I think this is your best bet. The reason is that the poultry litter is a cheap source of nutrient. And so it helps to offset the cost of your cover crop. Reduced tillage actually saving you money, right? So when you do the economics also on this, it's very important. That is my goal. That is my recommendation. Is that let a management practice, adopt management practices that helps to save on input costs or that reduces or sustain your production costs. If you are just adopting management practices and not take into account the concentration of the economics, it might be a challenge. But reduce data, we've done it. We've done a lot of sites. It's because of time I can't show all the studies. But so clearly we are showing that you can do soil health management practices and be economically sustainable and be sustainable. And then it's a slow build up that things are happening. In this one, we have not yet built our organic matter as we should. But something is happening. You see, we are improving our respiration, which means that the microbiology of the soil, we are building the biology of the soil, which is all good. And so it can be done and it can be sustainable. All right, 2 slides. Carbon, big deal now. Carbon monitoring, I have just 2 slides on this. Why am I showing this? Everything we are doing so far, building soil health, the key thing is you're going to build organic matter, which has a direct relationship with organic carbon. NRCS supports that. This is a program, this is a SIMA 221. That is a conservation program that will give you fund you so that you can take audited carbon stock of your values, of your soil, of your field. It pays money to growers to do carbon stock monitoring. I think that that's a good thing to be involved in if you are not aware, because then what happens is that you can engage meaningfully. You may not want to, or if you want to, but you can engage meaningfully in the carbon market. Now, we have different types of carbon market, a lot of busy slides, but don't worry, let's focus on these ones. We have the contract principles, then you do a prompt delivery, forward crediting. Prompt means that I take my time, I have audited carbon measurement. I can tell you that over the past 10 years, this is how much carbon I've built in my soil. And then you sell it. Zero risk, right? Because you are selling what you have built. But then the forward credit is where you sign contract and then they ask you to adopt the management practices in hope that you can build your soil organic matter. And you don't always, some of them might not even measure. Some of them will actually, but the question is, some of the companies are folding. Now, the likelihood is very less because of government support, but there are also considerations. These are typical contracts, statements. These are actually taken from the contract. That those who do that forward crediting means that you sign a contract, I'm going to do this, blah, 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 sign. You are bound to that terms of the contract. Some of them can be as long as 100 years. Are you sure you're going to be around to fulfill that expectation? Do you know whether your descendants are going to follow that? Why do you set up boundaries for some limitations that you can fulfill? I'd rather be on the safer side. Bank it yourself. Do the NLCS, do the carbon measurement. It's audited by NLCS. In 5-10 years, and you see Georgia also, you saw my organic matter values. Those are even good. I've seen organic matter in Georgia that are like 0.4. The good thing is that in poor soils like this, we can easily build up our organic matter. And when we are talking about organic matter, that is huge. 0.1 is a lot of carbon. Let's do the math. 0.6 inches. An acre is about 2 million pounds. So 2 million pounds, if you can build 1% organic matter, which is huge jump. But that is 2 million pounds right there. Let's say you can build 2 million tons, you can build 0.1%. That's still how much? From 2 million, you still have quite a lot of, it's a lot. So when we are talking about building so organic carbon matter, it's a lot that goes into it, and that can just translate to money. But my concerns here are the buyer can, or the one that the companies can just quit, terminate the contract. All the money you put into it, you've got terminated. But you, the grower, cannot default. And when you default, there are consequences. So there are things that I have concerns about the forward crediting system. I'd rather have you bank it and then use it. All right? I'm going to end right here. If there are questions, otherwise I'll have to guys go ahead, and then after that we can open up for question session time.
All right. Glen Harris, Soil Fertility Extension. Started in Tipton in March of '94, so this is about my 29th or 30th one. So, call talk first. Done a lot of meetings, like I said. Good news is, I got a couple good news. How's that? Good news is I'm not going to show you a lot of data. Just the bad news is these slides don't fit on the slide thing very well. We didn't call mine up. It's over here somewhere. That's over here. All right. So trying to think of what I was going to share with you today. I'm like, I showed you a lot of data, we talked about other things, but I got to thinking I can only talk to you one more time. This production workshop as a UGA Extension Specialist, what would I tell you? And I got to thinking, spend a lot of time looking at new things. Those things are going to take us over the edge. And I think we need to continue looking at some of these new things always, but we don't want to forget the basics either. And I think that's my take-home message. I really think a lot of the basics get us, you know, real close to the finish line. Maybe some of these other ones will take us a little higher, but back to the basics is not a bad strategy to go with. I told you I wasn't going to show you a lot of data, but I did want to show this. This is part of the good news. Fertilizer prices are down compared to the last 2 years. The last 2 years, I spent most of my time talking to you about how to deal with higher fertilizer prices. And one of those messages was, you know, we're not going to make good yields by cutting fertilizer, so we can't cut. And I think we figured that out, and it worked out. And here we are. We're still here, so that's good. Good news now is they have come down. They're probably not as down as far as we want, but they are down compared to last year. The economists, for the budgets they put together in December, they're using 70, 65, and 50 for percent per pound of NP and K. And I priced them the other day, was even lower than that. And they said, well, it might go up a little before we plant. Who knows? But again, bottom line is prices are down compared to last year. So, when I first got here, 30 years ago, I put together a strategy, fertilization strategy for all the crops I work. I not only work cotton, but I work with peanuts and corn and soybeans. And all the strategies look fairly similar, and they're kind of chronological. They start with soil testing, of course, and talk about pH and liming, and they go through NP and K, some other things, and then with troubleshooting. So this is what I call the boring part of my talk. So I'm going to go through it. I'm not going to even read all those. We're just going to look at it for a second. By the way, these are in the production guide, and you know we could spend half an hour talking about each one of those probably. We're not going to do that. And you can read about in depth a lot of them in the production guide. So, but the other thing, and I've said this before, I know in meetings, is that it's just as important what's not on this slide as what's on it, right? So if you don't see it on this slide, it's probably one of those main things that really gets us really far. And you probably guess where this is going. This is a word that gets me in trouble a lot. All right. My first meeting I did this year, after I did the meeting, corn meeting, county agent called me and said, I got a call about your talk. I'm like, oh, great. They said, no, it wasn't good. They were mad at you. They thought they called your product snake oil. And I didn't. I thought I was pretty clear. I didn't. Make that story worse, the county agent was my daughter. So, that was kind of interesting, but anyway, you know, because I hate Dad, you know. Anyway, but by the way, has anybody seen this show? This is a real show. It's on Fox, not Fox News, but on Fox. All right, and they take pairs of products. One's real, one's snake oil, and they have contestants. And they give them a little information, and we got to pick which one's which. It's really pretty interesting. Yeah. Now you would think I'd be pretty good at this, right? After all these years. But my defense, I haven't had any fertilizer products or anything like it, but I'm not very good at this show. But it is still it's entertaining, I can tell you. So David Spade's the host. He's pretty funny. But another way to look at this fertilization scheme is to think about the 4 R's. The 4 R's fertilization, the Fertilizer Institute came up with this. I think I looked it up, it was like 20 years ago. And I remember when it first came out, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. But the more I thought about it, and the more I looked at my research program, you know, it really makes a lot of sense. You got to have the right rate, the right source, the right time, and the right placement of fertilizer. That's where we get the 4 R's from. I even see this kind of creeping in some other things now. You'll see people talk about the right this, the right that. It's kind of interesting. I think a lot of times we focus on rate. Just tell me how much I need. Just go down to the store, give me what you got, I'll put it out now. Okay? And I'll just sling it out there. But again, you got to take all these into account. So I think it is a really good way to look at it. And again, I told you I'm going to show you a lot of data, but I'm going to show you some data slides just to give you some examples of these. So rate, of course, when it comes to cotton, we have recommendation, we can do NP and K together because we have recommendations for NP together by yield goal. Along the bottom here is half bale, 2, 2.5, 3. Our official recommendations end at 3 bale. I went to 3.5 and 4. This is 9 site locations. There were supposed to be 10, but I lost Camilla to Hurricane Michael because you see this was done in 17 and 18. All the same variety, all irrigated. The curve is not like you would see with corn, because I have data on corn. It's a lot better curve, but it is, in general, I mean, it's a pretty good curve as far as how it goes up. The take-home message, too, is that when you fertilize for 3 bale, even when you don't make 3 bale, it's still, the more cotton you make, you're still paying for the fertilizer. And I got just one example up here. In 2021, fertilizer price is 85% cotton. You know, it varies with the, obviously, with the cost of the fertilizer and the price of cotton, but even when fertilizer prices were high, it's still, we didn't drop off until we started trying to push it too far to go to 4 bale cotton. So rate, again, I think we got a pretty good handle on. Source, there's a lot of ways to fertilize cotton, because you got pre-plant, side dress, base foliar, you know, there's a lot of different things going on. I'll just focus on one example. You got some choices for nitrogen side dress materials on cotton, all right? And there's more up here than you probably are going to be faced with or whatever. But the main, if you're using a solid material, you're probably using ammonium nitrate or urea, it's the U. If you're using liquid, you're probably using one of these two, 18 or 28. And this always reminds me of the cotton varieties graphs that our camp hand shows, our cotton specialists. We got a lot of good varieties. You know, you can try to pick and choose from top and bottom. Same thing with nitrogen materials. These all work, but you know, which ones maybe trend to the top, etc. What's interesting is, this is calcium ammonium nitrate. If you didn't know it, 18 liquid is basically liquid ammonium nitrate. So all the things that are ammonium nitrate based seem to trend toward the top. Now this is only 4 site years, but still, and decent yields. And there's a 200-pound difference from top to bottom. So, you know, take that into account. Urea, we use a lot of urea, it's cheap, and it might not be fair to put it, but that's where it ended up in this data set. Maybe it's not as consistent, but we can make it work. And it is going to be harder, they tell me, to get solid ammonium nitrate this year. This is the way the market's going. So anyway, you have some choices, and when it comes to sources. Now timing, one of the big issues has been over the years is potassium timing. I've done a number of studies. I really like putting my potassium out forward or early, planting or maybe up the first square. Yes, on sandy ground, you get a lot of rain, it might be a benefit to put some potassium out later, but it's not the same as nitrogen. And most of the data I have shows that you're probably better off putting it up front. This was at a site really low potassium. When you don't put potassium fertilizer on cotton, you can only make 144 pound a litre. That's almost not worth picking, right? All the rest are different splits. Although this bar here is at all your potassium at planting, going all the way up to this last one is all at planting plus foliar. This is the putting on potassium late. You see it dropped off. So I feel pretty good about the recommendation of putting potassium more forward or up front than later. So that's a timing issue. All right. Now placement. One of the things about placement, we can talk about banding fertilizer if you want, but I think this is interesting. Working with Simmerberg, you might have heard him in the Precision Ag talk, and we realized our recommendation is to take 2.5 acre grids if you're taking grid samples. And a lot of folks are taking 10 and 5 acre grids. And what we found is you're really not capturing the variability when you go that high. You really need to be at 2.5 acres. And Zimmer even talks about going to 1s. I think that's a little too far right now. But 2.5 acre grids, and I can show you the data, he can show you the data. It really picks up the variability better than 2.5 acre grids. Especially for things like pH and potassium, probably the 2 biggest issues we have on cotton. I mean, I think we do a decent job with nitrogen. We don't seem to have a lot of phosphorus problems. So grid sampling and variable rate and lime and potassium could really go a long way on making a good yield. All right, moving on. I wanted to show these slides just to point out. Anybody know, want to guess what that is? It looks like nitrogen, right, because it's yellow. But nitrogen would be more yellow on the bottom and work its way up. This is actually sulfur deficiency. And this seems to be showing up more on Georgia cotton. I know Florida has made some reports about it too. The reason is sulfur is mobile in soil, just like nitrogen. This is pretty sandy ground, as you can see this on. We see a lot of sulfur on corn, right, Henry? Deficiencies, and this can happen on cotton also. I don't like to foliar feed it and try to fix it. You'll probably end up burning it. I like you to catch this as early as you can and just put some nitrogen that has sulfur in it, like an 18, 28 ammonium sulfate. You got options, and it'll be worth it because I have 2 data sets over the years. One I did by accident, and one I did on purpose. And you'd also say, well, geez, what did that yield? In both cases, I made at least a bale of cotton, but where I fixed the sulfur problem, I made 2 bales of cotton. It cost me a bale of cotton not to fix the sulfur problem. That's huge. All right, so just keep an eye out for that. I like a little sulfur at planting and then in my side dress even. I think it's worth the money. All right, so I'll finish my talk with 2 things. Like I said, they're kind of new. It's hard to pick up a farm magazine, it seems, that these days without reading about a new biological material or carbon credits. And Henry covered carbon a little bit. These biologicals are interesting. If you Google biologicals, and that's what I do, I think it's funny when county agents call me, I don't know the answer, I just Google it. I'm like, man, you could have done that. Maybe there's an art to Googling, right? Keywords and how you do it. Because in fact, if you Google biologicals, you're going to come up with a medical term. But if you Google agricultural biologicals, you're going to come up with a term that's general and basically says they're natural products. And it really boils down to a lot of them. They can do different things. There's biostimulants, biopesticides, but these biofertility ones are the ones I'm most interested in. They can fix nitrogen out of the air or help solubilize phosphorus in the soil. And they're basically microorganisms. They're bacteria or fungi, usually bacteria. Okay? Clay, you mind closing that door? Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, so that's what they are. Why the sudden interest? I think it goes with this whole wave of being environmentally friendly, regenerative ag, sustainable ag, carbon, soil health, it's all right in there. A lot of that's coming from public pressure, right? The Walmarts of the world want you to do these things, etc. And of course, the companies must think they can benefit, make some money, hopefully help the farmer. Everybody wins. My whole issue with these, a lot of these things are pretty new. We're still trying to figure out how they work. Let's not get ahead of the research. Let's figure out which ones fit. It's also a little bit of a tough game, and we're going to talk about that.
Tell us about your slide. Tell us about your slide.
Yes, sir.
Well, what's the difference right there?
Difference between what?
Whatever's growing.
Oh, that corner?
Yeah.
I usually like to show this slide, Michael, just to show this is what corn in South Georgia will look like with no fertilizer, and this looks when you fertilize.
Okay. I thought that was biological by itself. I was like, yeah, you hold up. We got to know about that.
I'm hoping to retire in August. That's one I'm going to sell.
That is not a snake oil, I can tell you that.
I'm going to call it biological. I'm going to throw a bunch of nitrogen out there.
Well, that was like a trick question. You're sitting here talking about biologicals, and you see the picture, and you go, "Oh, let's change the slide." I was like, "No."
I forgot that was even up there. I'm glad you're paying attention.
I'm paying attention, man. I come to make money.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But these are not new either, right? BT has been around a long time. You can buy a BT powder and sprinkle it on your organic garden, kill worms. We figured out how to put it in the plant. Now the rhizobia is interesting because a lot of these new biologicals, the ones that fix nitrogen, they don't form a nodule and fix enough for the whole plant. They're more I know one out there saying it can fix up to 40 pounds of nitrogen, which would be fine. We're still going to have to come up with more nitrogen on something like corn or cotton. So we don't want to get too carried away. But the other thing, the reason why I think we got to walk before we run. Da Vinci said we know more about movement of celestial bodies than the soil underfoot. They say we know more about space in the bottom of the oceans. We know more about that than we do of the soil that we walk on when we walk these farm fields. And the reason is it's a complex system. There's millions of bacteria and fungi, all kinds of species. They're all competing for space. So then we take a bacteria that we've reared in the lab to throw out there. It's got to compete for food source, and et cetera. I mean, it's just kind of a tough world out there, and we got to figure it out. I'm probably the only one in this room that I know I am that knows who this guy is. This was my major professor during my PhD. He's a world-known soil microbiologist. And when I was in grad school over 30 years ago, he said we're a long way from farming the microbe. And I got to thinking about that. You know, that was 30 years ago, right? So how much, that's a long time ago. How much closer are we now? I'm not sure we are. There's definitely a push to try to figure it out now, and that might be a good thing. By the way, he also said, you know, because we're all trying to get corn to fix nitrogen or whatever. He said it might be easier to get a legume to put on grain than it would be to get a non-legume to fix nitrogen. Think about that. It might be easier to get alfalfa to put on grain than it would be to make corn fix nitrogen. He was Canadian. Most Canadians are kind of crazy anyway, if you don't know. Anybody from Canada in here? Yeah, we're pretty far from Canada. I figured it was pretty safe. But anyway, interesting. All right, I'll finish with this, and Henry already touched on this. You know, putting this whole carbon thing in perspective, and the reason I do this is that apparently, you know, farmers are getting approached with buying or selling carbon credits. I did a meeting in South Carolina, and you know, they're looking at these contracts and trying to figure out what they are. Do I have to increase my soil organic matter in my soil? Is that how I'm going to get paid? Or one guy told me the contract said that you just do it, we'll figure you're fixing carbon. That's kind of interesting. Another guy's getting paid to put biochar on his fields. So I'm going to follow up on that one, Henry. We need to follow up, maybe do a visit on that one. But the whole issue is, of course, is carbon dioxide in the air and get fixed by plants. And then when the residues, you know, they get stored in soil. Soil's the biggest, you know, reservoir, basically, if you will, is carbon. But as Henry mentioned, it's hard to build, and once you stir up the soil, it can go back up in the air. And then, of course, anytime you burn a fossil fuel, you know, it goes up in the air. Used to be, they called them pollution credits, right? So a company that's putting a bunch of carbon up in the air, they said, well, I'll pay a farmer over here to fix the carbon to offset it. They call them carbon offsets or pollution. Apparently now they're calling it greenwashing, okay? That sounds good, right, Richard? It's a friendly term. But that's the issue, all right? Henry already told you, I mean, we don't have any, there's no silver bullets here. It's not rocket science. It's not nothing new. We know the best way to build organic matter in South Georgia soils. I took this picture when I first started, probably, like I said, about 30 years ago. It's Coffee County near Douglas, Georgia. And this grower was growing a thick rye cover crop. And he was fertilizing with chicken litter and then strip till. So all the things Henry mentioned, he is using cover crop, reduced tillage, organic amendments. And if you got cows, also rotational grazing. If you had trees, there are also some contracts in these carbon credit things for going into forestry, I believe. So there's some, if they're going to pay us to do something that will help our soils, help retain water and nutrients, it could be a good thing. A little leery about some of those contracts, though. They say it's a little bit like the Wild West of Bitcoin. That makes me nervous. All right, so just keep that in mind. I'll leave that to the economists. Of course, there's more organic amendments. Chicken litter, really, the carbon nitrogen ratio on it's pretty low. It kind of degrades pretty fast. Rye, it's got a higher one, it's a better pound for pound building organic matter. But you got all kinds of things out there. You even got burnt chicken litter, gym trash, gypsums, byproduct limes. There's a lot of things out there. Since Henry mentioned biochar, if you didn't know, that's when you just take like a woody material and you burn it under low oxygen. It's basically it's charcoal, basically what it is, without the other lighter fluid type stuff in there to put your hamburgers on. Way to lock up carbon. You know, how much does that help our soils, hold the things? Again, Henry's doing the research on that. But I'll finish with this slide, and now you're going to say, okay, he's really lost his mind. Now he's showing cartoons. All right. But I thought this was interesting. I was reading reading a book and thinking about these carbon credits, and it got into this discussion about who's got the higher carbon footprint, Fred Flintstone or George Jetson. So, by the way, does anybody not know who these people are, these two characters? I wasn't sure they showed them in Henry's country growing up, but I'll fill you in. But I thought it was interesting because they said Fred is good, right? I mean, and these guys are both, middle-aged, working-class guys, right? He's in the Stone Age, so all of his stuff is natural, his building materials, etc. No fossil fuels, they're not even formed yet. Dinosaurs are still around. His net energy is zero. He has the greenest energy in the world. Remember his car, he did it with his feet. So they said that's really green energy. Can't get better than that. The one that hurt, I'm kind of glad you kind of have a hard reading here. It said he wasn't dependent on the pesticide-dependent cotton industry. That kind of hurt when I read it. That's the way, that's what they said. Don't shoot me, I didn't write it. On the other side, you got George Jetson, probably wearing polyester, right? Doesn't that look kind of polyester? Doesn't look like cotton. He's in the future, he's high tech, everything's he pushes a button, his food pops out. He uses a flying car, and you can't see it right here maybe real good, but they say he uses a lot of electricity. And he's in an elevated city, he couldn't even walk if he wanted to. He's got to take his flying car, right? And somebody else said, well, maybe he's elevated because global warming and we flooded the earth. That's why we're up high flying around. That's really bad, right? All right, so two things I didn't like about this when I saw it. One is we can't go back. Even if we wanted to, we can't go back, right? We got to move forward. So that bothered me. The other thing is, George Jetson, he looks like he's using a lot of electricity, but we don't really know what's the source of that electricity, right? I mean, fossil fuels might be all gone. Maybe he's using solar. Maybe he's using wind. Maybe he's using something we don't even know about. I gave this talk at a peanut meeting, and my colleagues that were with me looked it up, and supposedly, if you look it up on the internet, George Jetson is 2 years old today. So just figure that out, all right? How long we're going to be flying around in cars. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of something interesting to think about. I know you think I'm crazy, that's all right. I would like to thank the Georgia Cotton Commission for all the years of their support, Georgia Plant Food, UGA Cotton Team, Lindsay McDonald, my technician that handles and runs my research program, Waters Lab for running a lot of my samples, and the UGA microchip. So I'll finish there and see if you have any questions. Any questions? I got some questions on chicken litter this morning. What else did we get, Henry?
We need to do the boric acid or soluble test before you leave.
Yeah. Well, I have an old slide I thought about pulling it out. I've always said pound for pound, boron's boron. And really, you either have soluble, which is sodium borate, or all the liquids are boric acid that I know.
Yeah.
So we've gotten away from soluble just because we don't like to pre-mix it. It's harder to mix. So really, we're using a lot of the boric acid. So.
But we're not putting out as much.
Well,
is the recommendation.
Our recommendation is half a pound.
Yeah.
So, this thing about it now, you only need 5 ounces. 5 ounces. When you don't need any, 5 ounces is enough.
I have a question.
So, yes.
So on the cover crops, is there a person that's the best contact to develop a mix? Because it varies.
Great question. I can tell you that actually they're at the Jimmy Carter Plant Center in Americas. USDA is looking at, and they got like an 8-way mix. I personally think that's probably getting a little overboard. Personally, I did some work in previous years, and if you're going to go with a small grain, I like rye over wheat and oats. If you're going to go with a legume, I like crimson clover because it dies back early, stands up better. Maybe hairy vetch, but that forms a mat. And then when you put them together, like a rye and a vetch, the vetch can crawl up and pull it down, so it gets a little tricky. So somebody at that center might be the best to talk about mixtures, I think.
Well, how do we contact that person? Because, is there any way we can tie our mix or our soil samples yearly so we can get the best mix for whatever situation we're facing right then?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to change. I don't think, on a yearly basis, that kind of thing's going to change.
However.
Yeah, because, basically the cover crop, the goal is, one, to cover soil so it won't erode.
Right.
Number two, provide organic matter. And then if you put the legume in, you'll get the nitrogen, but if you don't need the nitrogen, you leave it out, that kind of thing. I don't know, and Henry, I know you're doing some stuff up in Midville on some of these also. I'm sure that Henry can go from there, but there are people out there that can help.
Yeah, I finally got to Seth McAllister,
Yep.
as a person, and, he's a great guy. He helped me a lot, but we need to tighten my area in Early County.
That area traditionally has not been that common to have down there. So that'd be great. But yeah, we'll figure it out.
The person, or talked to you,
Yeah,
the area in the Plains Center, you said?
yeah. Nick McGee.
Nick McGee.
Nick McGee. Yeah, we can get you that. Yeah, good question. Any others? All right, I think, here we go.
I just want to make a comment that if you're going to grow cover crops, if you have a nematode problem, be careful to pick a cover crop that's not going to exacerbate your nematode problem. A lot of them, especially the legumes, will increase root knot nematodes.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
That's definitely something you need to take into consideration. And you get a mild winter where it's actively growing, a lot of times that can be an issue.
Yeah, I jumped on that real quick and almost picked one, and I was like, there's something, and we had a hold-up moment, and I'm like, get rid of that.
When I first got here, we did a lot of work over at Coffee County. I mean, we looked at everything, Austrian winter peas, lupins,
That's it,
plate
that's
things,
the one I was, that's so
all
pretty.
kinds of crazy stuff. And I don't know, rye is pretty good. And you can, you got the options to graze rye also.
Yes, sir.
So that's not a bad way to go. I mean, it's not the only thing, but it seems to work pretty well.
And it's different, it doesn't always need to be the same, does it? Every year to year.
you
Because
got a
have
mix.
different residuals.
If you got a mix, you could. I think there's some guys in the Carolinas, if you look at Google, that they've had some success up there.
Yeah, I don't know what changing the mix every year will do. I mean, the flip side of that is, you can improve, the rye is working for you to improve your organic matter, going to something else is not, I don't know, I don't think these cover crops like that have a tendency to get diseases and that kind of thing, so you got to rotate them, or maybe some herbicide, also, small grain probably when it comes to herbicide. So I don't know what the advantage of doing a lot of changing up or rotating. That's a good question.
Well, maybe like some would have a larger biomass and some would have less, and maybe some years you would need less, some years you would need more, some of them would accept, like where I live, I can't grow radishes,
Yeah, those
there's
tillage
not enough
radishes.
time in my time frame.
Yeah.
I would love to.
You brought up another good point, though. It's interesting. I did some work early on. Even looking at above ground biomass and below ground, some things put on more roots or top growth. It can really vary. For example, hairy vetch does not have a lot of roots, and they're very fine, but it puts on a lot of top growth. Yep. But the first step is even put the cover crop in. So then when we're at that step, then you go from there and get better. So
Maybe broken, not even.
yeah, that's a good point. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming. I think there is one more session you got available to go to after this. Here's about economics.
Two rooms over. See ya.
Nick,